the new parking provision. So 8 car parking spaces provided as part of this application, 6 of those across where the current access to the site is, and then the other 2 on the eastern side. And then also the vehicle tracking to show the vehicles turning within the site. So just for reference, this was the site plan as approved under the previous application. So they're showing the access onto Lower Chase Road and the parking provision as it was. And then at that point, the industrial unit was extended as well. We now move on to images of the site. So this is from Lower Chase Road looking east. So residential development visible here as well as the industrial unit. The proposed access being further up this picture on the left. Also here showing the existing hedge and surrounding vegetation as well. This is the existing gate onto Lower Chase Road. This is not currently used, and as part of this application, this access would be closed up by the proposed hedge, replacement hedge included within the application. And here we have a view looking west. So the proposed access would there be on the right of this picture. Again, you can see the industrial unit and then residential development along this road as well. And then a final view just into the site from Ludwell's Close, which is the neighbouring residential development. This is the parking area, but some gardens do also look onto the site from here, just showing where the vehicle parking is looking towards that area. The recommendation is to permit this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we go to public speaking, could you just point out where the flower meadow is, which is under the ecology and biodiversity, but I just wanted to see where they propose to plant it. It says on page 113 of our report, 280 square metres with wildflower mix and managed like a hay meadow. It all looks so industrial, I can't see where they're doing that.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding of the site is that there are areas, small areas of rough grass that exist on the site already, which would be, my understanding is maintained. Fortunately, I don't have the exact location of it outlined on that that plan there. However, we have conditioned that as part of the condition of the ecological management plan that was submitted and accepted by the ecologist.
Right, well, that's a mystery. Anyway, we'll move to public speaking. 2 public speakers, an objector, Mark Jones. Good morning, Mr. Jones. Please come forward and you can sit at any microphone you like, as long as you move it towards you. You can move the base, that's great, yeah. And when you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
So this section of Lower Chase Road, where Airbnb Mechanical is situated, has already been deemed not suitable for new vehicle entrance twice. Once on the 9th of August 2022 by Julie
Sorry
Pinnock.
to interrupt, but we're having difficulty hearing you. I don't know why that is, but...
Hello?
Yeah, that's
Cool.
great.
Do you want me to start again?
Yes.
So the section of Lower Chase Road where Airbnb Mechanical is situated has already been deemed not suitable for a new vehicle entrance twice. Once on the 9th of August 2022 by Julie Pinnock, BA Honours MTP MRTPI, the service lead for built environment, and on the 28th of July, Katia Holloway BS and Stuart Jarvis, Director of Economy, Transport and Environment, also raised concerns for new entrants in this section of Lower Chase Road, as it would, quote, increase hazard barrier for vulnerable road users in an area with already poor facilities. Letter dated the 9th of August. The proposed new access introduces increased risk and barrier to pedestrian permeability in an area already lacking in such facilities, endangering pedestrian safety and contrary to policy DM18 of the LPP2 and the advice contained in the NPPF. Letter dated the 28th of July 2022, Katia Holloway, on behalf of the Director of Economy, Transport and Environment, Stuart Jarvis, stated about this same area of highway on Lower Chase Road not being suitable for vehicular access. In this case, it was a car, not even a HGV. I quote, Lower Chase Road in this location is no footway, and he also says that additional vehicle crossover in an area of verge regularly used by pedestrians, creating an additional hazard barrier for vulnerable road users in an area with already poor facilities. The verge discussed must be on the side of the road of ARB Mechanical, is located as the other side of the road is a drainage ditch. All the above mentioned letters from are from a refused planning application for a new car entrance to service Tangle Down, a local house on Lower Chase Road, within 10 metres of ARB Mechanical's proposed new entrance on Lower Chase Road. So as conclusion, the Director of Economy, Transport and Environment, Stuart Jarvis, Katia Holloway BS and Julia Pinnock BA Honours MTP, all senior managers and professionals working for Highways, Hampshire Highways, conflict the opinion of less junior highway staff Tom Fisher and Amy Armstrong. The more senior staff members seem to contradict Tom and Amy in a couple of areas. Tom and Amy feel the road is suitable for a HGV entrance, but senior staff feel it's not suitable for a car. The oak tree location is disputed. Katia Holloway's letter contains a picture showing the tree very close to the highway, and it suggests is 1 or 2 metres closer to the road than the site plan suggests. Amy Armstrong says the tree is in a different location and the site plans are correct. Should Katia Holloway be correct, the HGV tracking lines go through the centre of the tree. Tom Fisher does not believe a traffic regulation order or OMP is needed for HGVs entering this section of Lower Chase Road, but the senior managers believe a car cannot safely access this stretch of road. The information provided clearly indicates that senior highway staff feel any entrance onto Lower Chase Road in a specific area of ARB Mechanical and the house Tangle Down is situated will cause danger to pedestrians. I suppose the question today is who is correct, and if Amy and Tom are correct, why have the owners of Tangle Down House been discriminated against? I'd also like to just point out that all the letters refer to the area. They don't refer to Tangle Down. It's all referred to the area of Lower Chase Road, of that road section.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Members of the committee, do you have any additional questions for Mr. Jones? No. So thank you very much, Mr. Jones.
So this gentleman, do you say you didn't understand any of it? Don't you, Colin? No, that's fine. Perfect. I've got letters here as well.
Thank you very much for coming along. No. Right, sorry, I lost my thread. So the next and the last public speaker is one of the ward councillors, Councillor Malcolm Wallace, who we've already heard from.
I'm going to be much quicker this time. Thank you.
So when you're ready, the clock will start.
Thank you.
Oh no, you've got 5 minutes.
Won't need it.
As being a ward councillor. Yeah.
So the proposed new entrance to ARB is off Lower Chase Road. This road is narrow, has no pavement, and is heavily used by cyclists, horse riders and pedestrians, including children en route to the local secondary school. I think that everyone understands the need for the business to have a usable entrance to the site. However, an entrance off this narrow road introduces additional risk to other road users and to neighbouring properties, particularly from large vehicles or lorries. The objections raised by local residents reflect these concerns. ARB have taken on board the concerns and in response have produced an operational management plan for the site. An operational management plan was not deemed necessary by Hampshire Highways, so I would like to thank ARB and the planning officer for going above and beyond in their efforts. The plan does not mitigate all the concerns, but demonstrates a real effort to reach an acceptable solution. There are still challenges with the new entrance, and so it's up to the committee, as you've just been hearing, and so it's up to the committee to determine if the proposed solution is acceptable. Thank you. Are there any questions on that?
Sorry? You have another 2 minutes plus.
No, I'm done.
Okay. Anybody on the committee wish to ask Councillor Wallace a supplementary
Just
question?
a quick question, Councillor. How are you aware, or do you know of how many HGV movements this site will generate in a day?
So the operational management plan that ARB have put in place it has, Cameron's probably got the numbers in front of him better than me actually. It has limited it, which is very positive.
No further questions? No. I know. You mean I have to ask? Yes, but I'm just asking you. Are there any further questions? I've got so many people wanting to sit in this chair this morning. It's quite hard work. Cameron, is there anything you wish to add in the light of what you've heard?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just to refer to the operational management plan in terms of the numbers. So what we've got here is that the site approximately is receiving about 2 to 3 deliveries a week by the 10-metre long vehicles or 3 axle rigid chassis vehicles. But the site isn't being used by large articulated lorries. My understanding of this is that there's more frequent use by transit-sized vans coming in and out of the site, as is the nature of the business. But in terms of the larger vehicles, the operational management plan is saying this is approximately 2 to 3 deliveries a week by those vehicles. I'd also just like to sort of clarify, obviously, in terms of the highways advice that we've received, that is from the Highways Authority as the experts in this case. I am aware of previous decisions along this road, but my understanding is that the material considerations are slightly different between the two cases, which was the reason for 2 different recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now, yes, Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Chair.
Is this for Cameron?
It is for Cameron.
Yep.
Yes, it's a question for Cameron. In Mr. Jones's 3 minutes, he talked about contravention of DM18. DM18 talks about the need for pedestrians and cyclists, safe attractive routes to and from the site, etc. With the existing entrance, which seems to be bigger, wider and more conducive to that, I can see that that is possible. In your opinion, does the proposed entrance meet the requirements of DM18 in terms of pedestrians and cyclists to get to the site? And I appreciate there's a lot of car parking, but we're also trying to encourage people not to use cars where possible to commute to work and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you say, the site is mainly accessed by vehicles. However, in terms of safe access to the site, as this road is existing, doesn't have a footpath, limited use by pedestrians. However, it was determined in this case that it would be an acceptable level to comply with the policy and meet that need.
I thought somebody else had their hand up, wanted to speak. No, wrong. So we'll move on then to our report. Principal development is on page 109. Are there any questions on that? Councillor Reid.
Just a clarification, if I may, Chair. The new entrance is going to be actually in front to the side, but the actual the barrier is actually coming forward towards the road. If you look at page 121, then at 124, it would appear that it's about 3/4 of a car length going forward, new gate from its original location.
Yeah, our paper reports don't have page numbers on, unfortunately. Cameron, do you want to answer that?
So just to clarify, are we talking about the proposed new gate on?
If you look at the fence line on page
Oh, here we are.
121, just about see it. Then go to page 122.
If you'd just like me to orientate slightly. So you can just see it here where I'm just moving the arrow to here. It is just labelled gates, so that is the proposed location of the new gates.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Reid?
Yes, Chair, as soon as I
Yeah.
realised what he'd said.
While we're on page 125, the landscape officer is very critical of that green gate. Have we done anything about that? Have we consulted the applicant?
Thank you, Chair. We've obviously taken the consultation into account. The consideration is what the alternatives potentially would be, and whether that would be unpainted like the current example, whether that would look worse. So taking into account everything and also considering there is a slight industrial presence already along that road, we've considered that it's acceptable in the green colour.
And then, while we're on the landscape officer, they are also very critical of the hedge along the roadway. Thicker hedge could be used.
Thank you, Chair. So my understanding of how the sort of process of the consultations on this application was initially that was the consultation that was provided by the landscape architect in-house, and that the proposed new planting, the replanting of the hedge along the frontage of the road, the closing of the gap, and then the trees that they are proposing to plant behind that was a response to that comment. I don't have a follow-up to that, but the proposal that you see in front of you was a response to the comments from the landscape architect.
Thank you, Councillor Rotter.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst we're on this this diagram, if I could ask about the trees, I've been trying to work out what is recommended for planting there. Are we going to make recommendations? Because one of the other pictures, just it looks like they're proposing conifers for there. I'm not sure how appropriate they would be, particularly if they're something horrendous like Leylandia, which will just. So are we conditioning approval of proposed trees or whatever? Because I think it's not a huge amount of space, is there? So the actual native whatever species are planted is quite important here, rather than just leave it up to them to put up some later.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the conditions, we haven't actually specifically asked for a type of tree. So at this present moment, it is the condition does allow some leniency on the type of tree that they would plant there.
Can we condition that our landscape officer approves whatever they're proposing to put there? Can we do that?
It would be best to amend the condition, Chair, condition 4, because it says the soft landscaping when it must be approved, and that we actually just ask for details of the relevant species to be submitted to us and approved. Slot that in. So there's another. No, we can slot that into condition 4.
Yeah, so we seem to be looking at, I think we've done principle of development, and we're looking at the impact on character and appearance of the area. Any further questions on that? Councillor Pearson?
Yeah, I'm just referring to that thing, that illustration that's on the screen at the moment. And my concern, and Cameron, correct me if there's, notice on the diagram there, it shows the turning circle of a 3-axle lorry coming out of the site. Now, knowing the width of that lane at that point, the only way that lorry could have made that turn is by going on the pavement opposite. So, is part of this to change the pavement There are two houses there, pavement in front. It says later on, 2 cars can pass. Say anything about a 3-axle lorry coming out of that site?
Thank you, Chair. So my understanding is when this was put again to the Highway Authority who did the assessment of this, the turning and vehicle tracking was considered acceptable without causing detriment to neighbouring dwellings or to the highway. Knowing that sort of stretch of road, there isn't necessarily a pavement there, but paving set slightly further back of the driveway of the neighbouring dwellings. My understanding is from the consultations I have that that's been accepted by the Highway Authority.
Yeah, I'm still looking at the landscape service lead, and one would think that this was an objection, although they don't say so. And it says the new entrance and the loss of hedgerow would have a negative impact on the character and visual amenity of Lower Chase Road.
Thank you, Chair. As I say, this was the response to that. What we can say is that there's approximately about 53 metres of replacement hedgerow and also the closing of the existing gap where the existing metal gates are to mitigate some of that. It's accepted that there is some loss just because this is a new access, but considering the overall character of the surrounding area and then the mitigation that they put forward as part of the application, we've determined it's acceptable.
May I just add, Chair? Karen's pointed out some of the impacts which might be negative and then the mitigating factors which might assist, and that's for you to consider in weighing up the balance in the planning balancing, concluding and making your decision. It's quite right that the landscape officer would say it does have a negative effect, but then we weigh that with other material considerations and how it might be mitigated. Cameron did detail about the replacement hedges and the additional species, the improved tree planting area. And actually, the grassed areas are that square in front of the building is one of the grassed areas where they're improving the ecology of that. And then also on the other side of the new entrance, there's that large rectangle. That's also a grassed area in reference to your query earlier.
Okay. Anything else on the character and appearance of the area? If not, then would this development affect the South Downs National Park? And the conclusion is no. Historic environment and neighbouring amenity. Any questions? Sustainable transport and ecology and biodiversity. And then anything else in the report, including the conditions. We've amended condition 4 and we've got a new condition 8 on the update sheet. No, so debate, any debate? Councillor Pearson.
I'm concerned about this application, Chairman. The first question to be asked is basically, is an additional entrance necessary when there is an adequate entrance coming off the 2177? Certain sight lines and everything are all in place. Now, this particular point, Lower Chase Road, is quite narrow. Why it says 2 cars can pass, frequently is a car parked on the side of the road at that point, either linked to where the end of this street, which is where the old shop used to be, or one of the houses opposite this suggested entrance point. That's assuming, of course, you can actually get this entrance into this site between the housing and the factory buildings. I had a look at it more closely yesterday, and quite frankly, I just can't see how it can be worked out. Because I also noticed that the county initially had 3 sets of reservations about this. The first response, visibility and tracking are acceptable, however, holding objections And that's one of the things I'm pointing out. A 3-axle lorry would not be able to come out of that entrance without going on the pavement opposite. Bear in mind, this is used by children going to the college, particularly during the rush hours. There's also a fair amount of traffic coming down Lower Trace Road anyway. I would really question that decision, whoever made it. Second of the points I noticed, access width has been provided, demonstrated the access is wide enough. Now, how they could do that without it actually be, the gates being there and actually demonstrating with a 3-axle lorry, because that diagram there suggests it isn't demonstrated. Because, as I say, it looks as though that lorry has got to go on the pavement opposite. Now, I don't think that's desirable, even if somebody in highways does. Third response, no objection by the operation manager plan. Opinion that, his opinion, that no opinion was required in the first place, which leaves me completely puzzled. In a situation like this, where you've got buildings, albeit accepting what Cameron said, only 2 3-axle lorries delivery a week at present modus of working. That's not to say there couldn't be more or even fewer. It worries me that. I can't see the space on that site to get that entrance in place. I'm not worried about the gates. Delighted about the improvement of the hedge. The hedge is an absolute mess. It really is. It's not a hedge. It's just a cacophony of rubbish that's there now. Anyway, I've said enough. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Rutter.
Thank you, Chair. I just need to point out to members that there is an existing gate which they could just open and use. There is an existing gate which they could just open and use. They don't want to because it's not going to be very convenient and it'll have all sorts of extra. No, I know. But nevertheless, the gate is there. It's an existing facility. So I think, we just have to accept that and say, look, this
Jane,
is, they're
you
doing
couldn't
their
get a
very,
tractor through
they're
that gate,
doing
let
their
alone a
very
3-axle lorry.
best. And I'll point out to you again that if it went to appeal, if Hampshire Highways have told us that there is enough room for this gateway and turning circles for lorries and everything else, we have to accept that. They are our statutory consultee. I would like to say that I think it's good that all these improvements in terms of the biodiversity of the site are there, that they're planting trees, they're improving the hedgerow, which I think we should all welcome. It's stepping back from the road, so there's more room for turning circles and things. I mean, on the basis of what is in front of us and in planning terms, I can't see any reason why we can turn it down, I'm afraid. So I will be supporting the officer recommendation.
Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Chair. I also share Councillor Pearson's concerns about the width of that road and the size of the vehicles coming in and out of the gate and how close they would get to the boundaries opposite the gate. But I am constrained by Hampshire Highways having approved this, but I do have the same concerns as Councillor Pearson.
Any more contributions to debate? I think we lost the plot with Lower Chase Road years ago, personally, because it's just all become industrialised. That said, this development is better than some of the others lower down the road, and surely no one's going to put in an application if the lorries that are going to be using it can't get in. And surely Hampshire Highways would not say, yes, they did request amended plans, which are to their satisfaction. And surely Hampshire Highways wouldn't agree that there wasn't a problem if there was. So I feel I have to rely on their expertise. And although, well, I don't like all the industries that have cropped up down Lower Chase Road, but this one isn't one of the worst ones, and I can't see a reason to refuse it. Any more contributions? So this application has been recommended for approval with the amendment of condition 4. Could you just remind me, Lola, what that was?
Chair, it was to amend the condition so that details of the tree species shall be submitted to the local planning authority and approved in writing. And then it will continue with the condition as it is.
Yeah. Thank you. And then there's a new condition 8 on the update sheet, which I'm sure you've all read. Page 7 on the update sheet. So those in favour of approving this application, please show. Those against? So that application is approved. And we've had a very long morning and we have reached our lunch hour being what we have to discuss. When would you like to come back, committee? We didn't start at 2, but we didn't leave this room until 22. Excuse me just a minute, because this is my iPad coming back. So sorry. So we are now on item number 11, which is Texas Drive in Oliver's Battery. And I think the proposal is for a garage, but I haven't got the wording. Construction of an attached double garage to the existing dwelling, and it's 22/02170/HOU. Thank you very much.
Chair, I'm
So
going
the
to,
case officer.
Chair, I'm going
Yeah.
to withdraw to the public.
Sorry.
I'm going to withdraw to the public area now for this. Not to speak.
Oh, yes, you declared an interest at the appropriate time and you're now stepping down. And you're speaking, aren't you? So the case officer is Sean Quigley. And when you're ready, Sean, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. As you said, this is an application for an attached double garage to an existing dwelling. The dwelling is in open countryside to the south of the main extent of Oliver's Battery. There's a slide showing the site. It's the C-shaped site in the lighter coloured green area. And the main part of Oliver's Battery is in the top of that picture. There's an aerial shot showing the main house, Texas Drive running up the side to the north, which joins the main part of Oliver's Battery. So it's showing that it is in open countryside. There's the site plan showing the position of the proposed garage attached to the main C-shaped property, which is called Texas. Elevations of the proposed garage, noting that it's subservient to the main building and on the northern side of it, open countryside to the south. Ground floor plan showing the garage there at the bottom left-hand side, parking for two cars and bridge. Some photographs from around. This is from the footpath from the northwest, which is the main right of way. That's actually looking onto the site. The site is beyond that hedgerow and trees. That's from closer on to the south. Again, the house is behind that hedge. Garage is actually beyond the house behind that. Another view from the south, you get a glimpse there of the upper part of the existing building. The garage will be lower than that and on the other side. That's the main vehicular access to the dwelling. And again, that's a public right of way. Garage would be sort of, you can see, if you imagine looking beyond that gate, garage would be attached to the existing elevation of the house. And that's the outline of the case, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. We now move to public speaking, and the first person who's an objector is Diane Smith. No hurry, when you're ready. Any of the microphones. You've got 4 to choose from. Good afternoon. If you could put the microphone down a bit perhaps near your voice. That's lovely. And when you're ready to speak, you have 3 minutes. And the timer will start on the clock in front of you. Here on the screen.
Just press the button at the bottom of the microphone to switch it on. That's
it. Yep.
I wish to object to the proposed additions to the house in Texas Drive on the grounds that nothing has changed since the planning refusals. I believe 4 or 5 similar proposals were made, and that the appellant, Mr. Oakley, has not demonstrated that anything has changed. When the original planning consent was at last given, the double garage was withdrawn from the plan. You'll note that in the list of applications and refusals, due to the overall side of his application. He eventually made a choice to ask for extra dwelling space within the building and withdrew the extra space needed on the outside to provide for the garages. Mr. Oakley made his choice. He went for no garages and a smaller plan in a bid to get his approval at last. Nothing has changed since he made that choice. He had had larger buildings refused planning, so he settled for a smaller overall size and parking spaces outside instead of within the building framework. Permission was granted with a maximum size of overall building, which far exceeded other buildings and plots in the local area. In this area of outstanding national importance, actually part of the same habitat and chalk downland of the national park, no super large buildings have been given permission locally to go ahead. No change there then. No precedent established elsewhere. The SSI site on the top of the hill has not suddenly moved. It still overlooks the blot on the landscape, as most locals and incidental visitors call the present building. No change there then. We live still in a sensitive landscape. The historic tumuli are still extremely close to the boundary of the house, and ancient trackways pass a stone throws away. We still live within a sensitive and historic landscape. No change there then. The stark white nature of the building has not been camouflaged by any better, denser planting. If a photograph had been taken from the site of SSSI, you would have seen it standing out starkly. As we live within a sensitive and historic landscape. No change with the extra planting that was supposed to happen. It hasn't happened. The reduction in size of the buildings on the plot to compensate for the overlarge, inappropriate size of the building has not been completed, even though this was part of the planning consent. No change there then.
Mrs. Smith, I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you very much. But it could be that the members of the committee have questions of clarification for you. Do you, members of the committee, have any questions? Councillor Rutter.
Thank you. Yes, you were saying that if you looked at it from the site of the SSI, it would stand out like a sore thumb. Could you just describe how it looks, since we don't have a photograph to show that?
Well, it looks like an industrial building in the middle of a very open chalkland downland site. So it looks stark and stuck there.
It doesn't look in any way like an agricultural building, for instance, big barn or something.
No.
Okay, thank you.
It looks inappropriate.
Thank you. Any further questions? Mrs. Smith, thank you very much indeed for coming along. You can return to your seat now. And the next public speaker is one of the ward councillors, Councillor Brian Laming. And you know the score. When you're ready, you have 5 minutes.
Brian, can you switch off the other mic, please?
Good afternoon.
5 minutes?
This is probably the most contentious application this year. From the outset, this site has been subject to many planning applications, both for this site and the adjacent one. Most of the applications for both sites have been refused on the grounds of overdevelopment. It has been subject to many enforcement issues as well.
Councillor Laming, sorry to interrupt, but could you just move the microphone physically nearer you, and I'll add on some extra seconds.
Appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
I'll try not to take up
Thank
5
you.
minutes anyway. And it's been subject to many enforcement issues. We've had an awful lot of visits from planning officers as well as enforcement officers. It would seem that the owner pays little attention to the requirements of the permission granted, both in building and landscaping. This application must be viewed in the complete context of the history of the site, which was originally a small holding built on a former site of an army camp and designated for use by returning veterans. The house replaces a small dwelling of 115 square metres with approximately 400 square metres. Because of this huge increase, development rights, I believe, might have been withdrawn. I can't honestly remember. The original plan was for an internal garage, which was changed to an annex for the owner's partner's aged mother, a laudable change, although the application for the external garage was withdrawn due to objections of overdevelopment. Major redesigns of the interior were incorporated to follow access to the garage so it could be built in the future. And I would ask people to reflect on Mr. Elton's objection to the letter that came round recently. Please take into account this project was also declared as a self-build. The owner never moved in and rented it out. Recently, the house has been put up for sale and the council had to take action to claim the civil money together with penalties and interest. This did not stop the foundations when the property was built, including the garage. So those footings have been there. So therefore, I think this should be classified as a retrospective application. This is a sensitive site being part of the Compton Gap, and this house is highly visible across the gap. Any extension will only increase the visibility and harm the neighbourhood. The access is also extremely limited, as you will see in a moment, and any increase in traffic will be detrimental and cause safety concerns with pedestrians using the recreational park. I hope that the following PowerPoint presentation will share some of our concerns with you. From there, you can see that we have the foundations being built at the time of the construction of the main building. Next one, please. And there again, that's just a different view of what it is. And the next one, please. Now, this is the site as it was. You can see there, that's the house next door. And that was the house, that little area there of what was there before. So you can see that both properties were very, very small. Can we go on to the next slide, please? The applications for the other property was always deemed to be, to make sure that it was kept to the same size as previous. So you can see now how this has been changed, as well as all the other area here has all been reconstructed and dug away. If you go on to the next slide, please. You can see how this building sits in the landscape in the middle of a field and is highly visible from the other side when you look out over Oliver's Battery. The garage area will go in this part there, and that will increase that line by about getting on for 50%. So it's going to have a huge impact on the visual area of this. And this has always been the main concern, that this building sticks out like a sore thumb in rural, rolling countryside. So therefore, I would hope that you would consider refusing this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the committee, any supplementary question? As you're the ward councillor, one of the ward councillors, Councillor Laming, did you report the fact to enforcement that the footings for a garage were there?
Yes. amongst many other things. I think Lorna was involved in that when you were the enforcement team there, so you know that that was a fact that we reported that, as well as the contraventions of landscaping, as well as other matters of the building not being put in the right place.
It looks like that's it. So thank you very much
you.
for speaking today. And then we've got the agent and supporter, Jeremy Tyrrell. Good afternoon, Mr. Tyrrell.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
When you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm surprised that this householder application for an attached garage has had to come to the planning committee, because I fail to see how it affects anyone or causes any planning harm. The property has only one immediate neighbour. That neighbour will not be affected by this extension, and that neighbour has not objected to this application. I'd simply like to take this opportunity to remind you of the key points that Mr. Quigley has set out in his report recommending approval. The position of the proposed garage on the western elevation means that it will be significantly screened from views into the site from the west, where the boundary is heavily treed, and will be obscured in longer views from the wider countryside to the south. The green roof proposed will minimise views from higher ground to the west. The proposed design and materials match those of the host dwelling and are therefore appropriate. Policy CP18 indicates that in settlement gaps, only development that does not physically or visually diminish the gap will be allowed. The scale, design and position of the proposed development means that it will not physically or visually diminish the settlement gap. The proposed development, by reason of its design and position, will not have a significant impact on the character or appearance of the area. The proposal is therefore considered to be in accordance with policies CP13, CP18, CP20 of the Local Plan Part 1 and policies DM15, DM18, DM23 of Local Plan Part 2 and the Village Design Statement. In terms of neighbour amenity, the site is in an isolated position, set in open countryside away from existing development, and therefore the proposed garage will not have any impact on the residential amenities of the occupiers of existing dwellings in the area. The proposal is therefore in accordance with policy DM17 of Local Plan Part 2. In conclusion, the proposed garage is of an appropriate size and design, incorporating high quality materials. It will not have a significant impact on either the character or appearance of the area or the residential amenities of the occupiers of existing dwellings. Whilst it will be located in a settlement gap, it will not detract from the strategic function of that designation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there could be questions for you from the committee, and I have a few. Have you been, Mr. Tyrrell, have you been the agent all the way through?
When you say all the way through,
well,
for the house that has been
when the larger
constructed.
house was given planning permission?
Yes, I mean, there is some
Yeah.
planning history that predates
Yeah.
me and our firm for some previous applications that were refused.
I suppose my question is, even though it's in the middle of open countryside, it's because it's in the open countryside that it's very visible. Was consideration not given to perhaps putting the garage inside, out of sight?
Well, where the garage has been proposed, it is to the west side of the house, which you'll have seen from the photographs if you visited site. The land to the west is at a higher level, and the garage that's proposed is set as a lower level. The roof level is lower than the main house. So it is visually very subservient to the house. We went through extensive exercises with your landscape and open space officer for the design of the original house to work with him on that in terms of visual impact. And we contend, and I think your officers shared the same view, that the garage does not add to the visual impact.
Thank you. I've got two more questions,
Okay.
sorry. Why were the footings for the garage put in, I think it was 2017?
That I don't know, and that's not something I was aware of, to be honest.
You weren't involved in that?
No.
And are there any proposals to build on top of the current garage? You'd have to apply for planning permission anyway. But
When you say on top of the
well, to have another bedroom or whatever on top?
do you mean another story on top of if,
Yeah.
if this garage were to be approved? I certainly wouldn't expect there to be. No, I mean the house that exists on site is single story. It's on one level, albeit split levels. It doesn't have an upper floor.
Okay.
And our client has certainly not made any suggestions that he'd like to add that. No.
Thank you. That's the end of my questions. Any further questions? Councillor Pearson?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Tyrrell, could you use the argument that see this building from a distance, it can only be seen with downland in behind it, and it doesn't stand prominently?
It depends where you look at it from, but I suppose the most well, the view from the, what would it be, the south up towards Yew Hill, you're looking down upon the dwelling, and the background is then the settlement of Oliver's Battery. Yes.
Just the last question. The colour chosen for the building is quite stark. Makes it stand out even in council laying. Had you considered another colour for the building, so having to change that, make it merge into the countryside better?
The original concept that, again, we worked with your officers and your open space officer for the house was for a light coloured building that melded into the chalk downland, but also tones with the backdrop of Oliver's Battery. So if you look at those long range views, houses that you see beyond it are generally pale colours. They're sort of white or cream, pale rendered colours. That was the logic behind that choice.
Because they're always contentious, aren't
They are, they can be.
Okay, thank you very much, Tyler.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Tyrrell, for coming along today.
Thank you for your time.
And we are going to turn to our report. A lot of the paragraphs are very short. So I'm looking at page 136. So if we take questions on principle of development, impact on the character and appearance of the area, we've heard a bit about that from neighbours, and the South Downs National Park, and neighbouring amenities and transport. So pages 136, 137. No questions? So we move over the page to 138, which includes sustainability, sustainable drainage, equality, planning balance and conclusions, and the conditions and informative. Councillor Rutter.
We've had some concerns that previous conditions on landscaping haven't been properly followed through. There's nothing here about landscaping or indeed the impact on biodiversity and so on. Is that not a consideration when you're talking about an extension, a garage extension, or is anything being recommended in terms of landscaping or improving biodiversity, such as swift boxes, that sort of thing?
All I'd say is that my responsibility has been for considering the merits of this application. So the garage itself, pros and cons of that application. So that doesn't give rise to specific on ecology or landscaping, given that it's a fairly proportionate addition to a larger building. After saying that, it does have a green roof, which adds ecological benefit, where there was none. the overall position.
Thank you.
Looking at the conditions and the update sheet, Councillor Laming has requested, if permitted, several additions to the conditions. So the provision of electric vehicle chargers and limits on the use of the garage. I think what he means by that is that it should just be used for residential, vehicles rather than residential. And, well, you can read what he says in number 2. Could I have your comments on that, Sean?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there was 3 suggested conditions. As you said, electrical vehicle charging points. We didn't feel able to accept that because it didn't meet the tests of conditions. It wasn't necessarily necessary and wholly related to this development. The second one, I think, was about withdrawing permitted development rights, and having checked, the inspector who allowed the appeal that allowed the existing building did actually remove permitted development rights from all the categories. So that in that way, that's already taken care of.
So would that include the garage, which wasn't built at that time?
As I understand it, it would, Chair, yes. And then the third one, from the suggestion from Councillor Laming, was to condition and control the use of the garage. So in the update sheet, I've proposed to add a condition to a permission, if it's granted, that the garage should be limited to the parking of vehicles and incidental or ancillary uses related to the house, so storage essentially. So in that way, we do control the use of that garage.
Yeah, so this would be a new condition then?
Correct.
Yeah. Why was the decision taken that electric vehicle chargers didn't need to be installed? Because all new housing, we ask for that to happen.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, I took advice, and it was considered that we had no grounds to insist that that such a condition on electrical charging was appropriate.
I'm surprised at that because, you know, we are aiming to be a green council, and I can't see the harm in having a condition about that.
I don't think it would be unreasonable, Chair, given that we do have a supplementary planning guidance document on it. It's a material consideration, and the statement that's required asks the developer and owner to confirm that they will be providing it, and so I don't think it's an unreasonable catch that. I haven't yet got to the point where we've worded something to do with the statement, but we can.
Any further questions on anything? If not, we'll move into debate. Councillor Rotter.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to accept the proposed extra condition on the use of the garage as proposed by our officer, and also welcome Lorna's proposal that it's not unreasonable to condition that there should be electric vehicle charging facilities within the garage or as part of the garage construction. So if we could add that as another condition, I'd like to propose that, please. Otherwise, I'm afraid that we're not considering here whether or not the house is beautiful or an eyesore in the landscape or anything else. It's there, and we have to consider whether or not it's reasonable, given our planning policies, to allow this extra garage extension onto the house. And I don't think that there are any planning considerations that we can use to object to it. It's got a green roof, so that is, as our officer has said, is actually improving the biodiversity of the site. It's essentially out of sight. It's sort of hidden away around the back of the house, behind existing hedgerows and trees and so on. So notwithstanding the very unfortunate planning history that goes with this dwelling, in this particular case, in what we're considering today, I don't think there are any planning reasons that we could reasonably use to object to it. So with those two extra conditions, I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very familiar with the site and walked past it many times. So I have an understanding of the context. But given the highly sensitivity of the site and the very contested planning history, it's not surprising that there are numerous objections to further development of the site. And I also note a number of allegations made in the course of objections. So that's all very frustrating for people involved. But as I understand it, where we are is that the planning inspector approved the house as built. Permitted development rights were removed. At that point, the various applications and negotiations and statements may have been made over the previous number of years. Become history. We are where we are. So our task today is to determine whether to approve a legitimate application, to be made in good. I don't think it's unreasonable for the owner of any house to seek to add a garage, and the proposed garage would not, in my view, significantly visible, so significantly visible as to detriment to the landscape, and therefore I will be supporting.
Any more debate? Yes, I agree with my two colleagues. It does stick out. I mean, it's in the middle of countryside, but it's there now. And I agree with Councillor Edwards, it's not unreasonable to put a garage on the side. I do support the two extra conditions proposed by Councillor Laming, that they put in electric vehicle charges, and then also that the garage is only for the purpose of private motor vehicles or ancillary purposes to the main dwelling. In other words, it can't be an annex. There's a whole lot of regrettable circumstances of people ignoring what the planning department have required. But I hope now that this will be the end of it, and that the owner will be happy with the extension, which is the garage. So yes, I should be supporting it because I can't see any reason to refuse it. So having said that, we move to the vote. So do you all agree with those two extra conditions, Councillor Rutter and I propose?
Agreed.
Thank you. So this application has been recommended for approval with two extra conditions, which, as we've stated, so if you wish to approve this application, please show. And against? Abstention? Right, so that application has been permitted. Thank you very much. repeat the stump. It has a T4 condition on it. It's 22/02430/TPO, and it's at White Lodge, Hambledon Road, Denmead. Case officer is John Bartlett. Lorna's here, sorting everyone's IT out. And for those listening at home, we're just sorting out the presentation slides, which I think are done.
Yeah, it's ready now. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
And John, when you're ready to listen to your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm here today to put before you this tree works application, which is to fell an oak tree at White Lodge. To give you some background to this case, a tree works application was received in October of last year to fell the oak tree. And this application comes before the committee due to an objection from the parish council. Evidence from an expert witness has been provided which implicates this oak tree as a likely material cause of damage. And we're seeking the confirmation of this application today. The oak tree is located next to the garage, just about to the side of the property of White Lodge. This sketch is an isometric sketch that we have from the independent consultant that we use to look at such cases. Now, what you see here is the direction of subsidence movement, which is pointing towards T5, which was on a previous application, and also T4, which is on this application. The movement is towards 20 millimeters, which is substantial movement on a property. Soil desiccation, evidence of soil desiccation has also been found under the foundations and under the by the oak tree at T4, which indicates its involvement. Now, the oak tree concerned is highly significant. We acknowledge that it's a significant tree in the landscape. And there's another view of it there. However, due to the evidence that's been provided by an independent consultant and also the insurers, we are recommending that this application is approved with a condition to replant with a suitable replacement. Thank you.
Thank you. Public speaking is next. We have one objector and the parish council representative. So objector, Michael Stewart? Not here. And so parish council representative, Councillor Kevin Andrioli. Good afternoon. So you have 3 minutes, and when you start speaking, the clock will start the countdown.
Good afternoon, everybody. This application, as we've heard, is to remove an oak tree on the boundary of the property. This is the second such application made last year, tail end of last year. The felling of tree 5 on the tree plan was requested last year, and despite Denmead Parish Council's request for that application to come to this committee, it was permitted on the 19th of October. This application to remove T4 on the plan was submitted on the 28th of October. there is an indication that at least one more tree on the plan is in danger. The WCC climate emergency plans call for safeguarding of our precious ecosystems. Denmead has been given no justification for the removal of this second tree, other than that it is implicated in subsidence of the footings of the building. Our contention is that either all of the implicated trees should have been applied for at the same time, or that the effect of removing each of them separately should be checked prior to removal of another. 9-day gap between the granting of one application and the reception of another hardly gives time for the tree to be removed, let alone for the removal to have any effect. We have been informed that several of the neighbouring houses have been underpinned and that the area is subject to flooding. Removing trees which have stood longer than the buildings near them is contrary to the WCC climate emergency plans to safeguard our habitats and ecosystems. It could also lead to land heave and further flooding. I will add an extra bit to my speech at this point and say that the neighbour who has unfortunately not attended today also told our planning committee that he owns the trees, the applicants don't. So we ask that you reject this application for which there is no justification and suggest that the applicant follow the strong local precedent of underpinning the house foundations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Andrioli, Councillor Andrioli? Councillor Potter?
Thank you, Chair. You say that the applicant doesn't own the tree. Do you know who does own the tree?
Our understanding and is claimed by Dr. Stewart that he owns the trees.
And he lives at?
He lives at the house next door, whose name I can't recall, I'm afraid.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I know that's not necessarily a planning condition, but
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Chair. That was the question I was going to ask, but a supplementary to that is who, and if you have the knowledge, who owned T5 tree or who claims to have owned that?
I believe that also is the next door neighbour. He believes that all the trees along there are within his boundary. I have no proof of that either way. My understanding was that he was intending to come today to make that point, and also the one about the flooding, etc. But obviously he hasn't. So,
do you know if T5 has come down yet?
I don't. I'd be very surprised if it had the time to come down yet, but it may well have done. I'm afraid I don't know. But it was 9 days, as I said, between granting of one and the application for the next one, which surprised us.
Thank you.
Right, so any other questions for Councillor Andrioli? No, so thank you very much for coming along this afternoon. And so questions on anything in the report? Councillor Westwood.
May I ask a question of the case officer?
Yes, of course. That's
Thank you.
Where we are.
So
yeah.
in your statement there, presentation, we engaged an expert to look at the tree, and the word you used was that this tree was likely cause of the subsidence. What does that actually mean, likely?
Well, the evidence that's been presented is strongly indicates that the oak tree is responsible for the damage. So all the evidence suggests that it is, and we can only go on what the structural engineers have recommended, as we are arboriculturalists, we're not structural engineers.
Thank you. So supplementary to that then, and on the information that would be given about tree T5, when our expert looked at the tree T4, which is the subject of this request, was tree T5 still in place, which had already been condemned effectively?
Yes, I carried out site visit recently, and T5 is still in situ.
Okay, and my supplementary to that is then, how can our expert, just enlighten me, say it is tree T4 that is giving the problem and not still tree 5, which was subject to a previous planning request to remove?
So the expert found that there was significant soil desiccation underneath T4, underneath the foundations that were near to T4, so the drying of the soil, which was a significant factor in the alleged damage.
Thank you. Could you point me at the location of T5 and how far that is from T4? Because that is rather confusing when you've got 2 trees involved in this and it's not clear where they are.
Well, sorry.
Use your mic, please, Sean.
T4 is here, and then T5 is slightly further along within this main group of trees, and is more to the side of the property there. But all of the trees are all quite close together within a group that is protected under this TPO, a group of oak trees.
Then can I say that I'm surprised that the professional report could identify between those trees without further invasion views into the ground and so on to understand what's going on. I find that hard to understand when it's so close together.
Yeah, all I can say is the evidence that's been provided by the insurers and also by our structural engineer, they recommend removal, and this is an independent consultant that we use regularly, and he has indicated that the tree is going to be having an effect there, significant effect.
Councillor Rutter?
Can I ask, in your professional opinion, is climate change affecting these trees and the way that they are affecting the nearby buildings?
Well, that's certainly going to be a factor in the next few years, because we had a significantly dry summer last year, and there are without doubt going to be further subsidence claims that implicate trees. It's going to be an issue because we are getting higher temperatures and longer dry summers, which lead to more subsidence cases.
Councillor Pearson?
Yeah, I'm picking up on what you just said there, John. Long dry summers that are creating the problem, isn't it? Okay, scenario, you remove these 2 trees. The request is, then any water taken from the up until that point, drained by the soil heave. Structural damage to White Lodge now.
That hasn't been picked up as a risk on this particular case.
Hasn't been picked up. What's your?
I'm
not going to take you to court. Just
yeah. I mean they are big trees, but I don't foresee that being a risk.
Mature trees. Mature tree takes an incredible volume out of the soil.
Yeah.
Difficult with a long dry summer. That's why many of the trees, oak trees, are using their leaves very early. I think some of them start. Judging by the state of the soil, those trees have been tried. Trees are gone. Rained by rainfall. now over the winter and beyond. That water's going to take, it's going to displace the soil.
Yeah, there's nothing that's been verified by any evidence that we've seen that would be a risk.
What's the experts you quote here, the acting for council?
They were acting on behalf of the city council. Yeah.
Okay, fine. I know I was bursting to say something. I'll shut up.
What would ask you, councillors, to consider the application is to fell the trees. Now, insurance company know these risks of felling the tree. So we have considered the heave aspect, and you're correct, the trees take the water at the ground. And therefore, if the insurer decides to go ahead and fell the trees, they do it at their own risk, because bearing in mind the plan provision is only given, we don't make them do it, we agree in principle to do it. So if they go ahead and fell the trees, then the ground heaves, that's their liability, not the council, because we're treating this as a plan application to fell the trees. So that risk is their calculated risk, that, you know, if it heaves, then they have to sort it out. But we don't need to consider, we're not structural engineers, we don't need to consider that aspect. We have to consider the tree. Yes.
Patiently, Councillor Laming.
Thank you very much,
I've
Chair.
noticed,
A couple of questions. First of all, how old do you estimate these oak trees are?
Well, I believe they're sort of up towards, well, over 100 years old, I would say, yeah.
So they're considerably older than the property?
Yeah, we would say that they are older than the property, yeah.
So then the legal question from my mind is that as those trees were there when they built the property, isn't it the property owner's responsibility rather than decimate a tree which was there under no fault of its own?
That would have been down to the building control at the time that would have approved the footings for the tree at the time. And bear in mind, at that time, the trees would have been the smaller trees grown now, so, but that would have been signed off as adequate at the time. Bear in mind, probably when them houses were built, they didn't know so much about soil and tree roots as we do now.
But we're holding the tree responsible for mistakes of the humans doing it. That's really
Talk into
my
the
point.
mic. Thank
Sorry.
you. If we can't hear your words of wisdom.
Sorry.
Have you finished? Yeah. Councillor Cunningham, then Councillor Rotter.
Thank you, Chair. Am I right in stating that the cost of underpinning would cost about £45,000 for the state that it is currently in? And that if we as a council do not give planning permission for this to be felled, that the cost, that should the occupier, the owner of the property decide to proceed with underpinning, that we would be liable?
That's correct. The council's not liable until up to the minute we refuse the application. When we refuse the application, then the liability becomes the council's. And at the moment, it's 45,000. In our experience, the cost that will double. It works because of the involved work, but also the recommendation, you know, is from the structural engineers to fell the trees. That they are specialists in their field to fell them, do that. But bearing in mind also with structural cases that if we were to make a recommendation now that was not backed up by structural engineers, even in 20, 30 years time, if there was a fault with them footings, the owner or the owner at the time would come back and say the council at the time recommended this, therefore you are liable for any damages, future damages. So yeah, once you say no, that's when the clock starts ticking and the liability kicks in.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the replacement trees. So presumably when the felling of T5 was given permission, that also included a condition that the tree should be replaced. Presumably you're recommending that they shouldn't go to exactly the same place, but nearby, and if perhaps you could tell me a bit more about whereabouts you think the replacement trees should go. And also, I'm assuming that these replacement trees that are suggested here, selected from the following tree types on page 154, are they much smaller trees? Will they grow to maturity at a much smaller size? Is that the point of recommending those three, please?
Compared to the oak trees, they will be smaller. In terms of the suitability as well, the trees that have been suggested on there are of lower water demands than oak trees. They won't have to go in exactly the same spot, but they can be, quite a few meters away from the original spot as well. But there is adequate space to plant replacement trees there.
And I know Councillor Edwards is waiting, but while we're talking about these trees, replacement trees, as they are replacing TPO, will they be TPO'd as well?
So the trees, if they're subject to the application, they're not automatically TPO'd. So a new TPO would have to be made in order for those trees to be protected.
So who has to make that?
Well, that would be a decision that we would make, but the trees wouldn't be, we wouldn't be able to protect them at this stage, the new trees.
We can, yes. Once the trees are planted, we'll be able to put a TP on them.
Yeah, okay. That's all I'm asking.
Yes, we
would. Or an emergency TPO, and then you confirm it later.
Yes, it'd be the same procedure.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Cunningham, and then Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Ivan, you just talked about planting of trees, the plural. How many trees are we just proposing to put to replace this one very large and effective?
There'll be 2 trees, one for T5 and one for T4.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a question for Mr. Girdler to answer, if you'd be so kind. I know nothing about trees. I can understand that from the point of view of an insurance company, minimising risk is what it's all about. Council's point of view, we need to recognise and try and minimise the impact on the environment of moving trees. So there's some conflict there, I guess. Total. My question is it, in your view, necessary to remove completely 2 or 3 trees, despite some pure number? And is it actually, is there any possibility of reducing the size?
This has been a very difficult case for us. You're correct in what we said to council. We wish to protect trees, but there are instances where we cannot. In this case, we've been, we've had our own structural engineer to give us technical advice. Their structural engineer from the insurance company giving us technical advice. We actually questioned. We looked for, vast like you've seen today, the distortion, what's going on with the footing. So we've asked for all this technical information. We've gone through it, and yes, there is a conflict in the policy, but we are where we are, as you say. The new trees have been planted for later on in years to come. Or, as we know, trees do have, as all of us, a life, to sell cycle. But in this case, we've had to take the professional experts' opinions, who have concluded both of these trees are implicating the foundations of this, building. They're the technical guys with found structure. We are, the tree people, so we can see, we understand what's going on. But as I say, it's been a hard decision. It's not an easy one. We acknowledge that, yes, they can be seen from the road as public amenity, but as you say, we are where we are. And, the best we can do is to get 2 new trees in there and put a TPO on there for the future, for future years to come. That answer all your questions? I can't remember.
And just my ignorant question, reducing the size of the trees is not an option?
Research has shown to make any difference to the tree, you have to reduce it by 90%. So, yeah, so you're talking some, so, in this situation, damage limitation, it's better to take them out and put 2 new trees back in again, because you're just going to end up with 2 stumps with epicorial growth on, and it's not suitable.
Councillor Westwood.
Thank you. In my view, there's 2 routes forward here. You talk about removing the trees, but another route is to strengthen the foundations of the house. Right? So there is a figure in the report of £45,000. I'm assuming that is the cost of the underpinning once the tree has been removed to stabilise the ground. My question is, has the other angle of strengthening the foundations of the house with the tree in place been costed? Is it a viable option as opposed to removing the trees?
Again, we've had to rely on their structural engineers' recommendations. We're not qualified to say whether the foundations can be strengthened or whatever. They've not mentioned that their recommendation is to fell the tree. As I say, they're the structural engineers, we're the ARBs. So we have no choice but to agree that.
Okay, my question is, have we asked the question?
Asked the question.
No, we haven't asked that question, no.
But we have the report in front of us. That's what we have to go on, and that's what, bearing on the legal position what we're in, the liability position that we're in, we're not really in a position to recommend structural engineer stuff.
That's fine. I understand your answer. Thank you.
Refreshing to hear I haven't referred to other experts. He was the expert, but who am I to say? Yeah, replacement trees. My experience takes a while altering that tree to develop a tree. Responsible for that. The householder wants to get rid of the trees, or where's the council?
There will be a condition on the plan application for the replacement tree that the trees will have to be watered to keep them going, and it actually says if the tree dies within 5 years, blah blah blah, they will need to replant the tree. So there's a condition for them to maintain the tree to ensure that they are established.
So do we have that definitely in the conditions, do we?
But it can be put in the conditions.
I think it should be, because I know crucial that is.
Yeah.
Chair, at the moment it actually says 2 years, not 5 years. On page 154, when we're talking about the period of time that the tree has to be there and replaced if it dies.
You can put 2 years on there, 5 years or 10 years on there. It doesn't really matter what, the time limit is, but the 2 years is the standard sort of time.
I'd be happy to increase that, but if you're going to put a TPO on them anyway, it doesn't matter, does it?
No, well, the TPO only covers the trees as it is. It doesn't make them replant them if they die through plant, only taking them down. But we can, if the committee wishes, we can change that from 2 to 5 years as a condition. That is not a problem.
Of that one right now, could you please show whether you wish the condition to remain at 2 years, or do you want to increase to 5 years? Increase to 5 years is the question. So you have your answer. Have you finished, Councillor Pearson? Yes. Yeah. Dan, I wonder if you could just summarise the legal position here.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. So, councillors, mention's been made today and this afternoon about we're here to just consider the application before us, shall we say, on planning merits. However, I would reasonably suggest that that's not the case, because obviously you are the purveyors of the public purse here. So what also goes into the planning balance for you to consider is indeed the question of liability and opening up the council, that is the ratepayer, to possible claims against the council for your decision if you're minded to go against officer recommendation. So it would be remiss of you to completely concentrate solely upon the planning merits. So it's my duty this afternoon to tell you what that law is. Mention's been made already by previous councillors that the house came after the tree, therefore that's the legal position. I'm afraid to say that's not correct, and the law simply says this. This is the Town and Country Planning Tree Preservation England regulations of 2012, regulation 24 deals with the issue of compensation. 24.1, if on a claim under this regulation, a person establishes that loss or damage has been caused or incurred in consequence of the refusal of any consent under these regulations, that person shall, subject to below, be entitled to compensation from the authority. So the simple position is, if you refuse this, you open up already the council to a claim to compensation. Now the test is for them to establish that loss or damage has been caused or incurred. Now, it's been mentioned already, this issue about the trees perhaps have been likely identified as being the culprits, T4, T5. How can you say it's one or the other? The question for any tribunal in deciding this issue of liability will be not beyond all reasonable doubt, i.e. that is to say that we are sure it's T4 or T5. It will be on the balance of probabilities, and that's a lower civil threshold, and that is, i.e. it's more likely than not. And that's what the law says. If it's more likely than not that T4 is responsible for causing any damage or loss to this particular property, then you shall be liable for any quantum, that is to say, anything that arises as a result of your decision to refuse. So that may well be underpinning. That may well, the insurer is also saying we want root protection barriers, because why would we indemnify this particular property to underpin? We also want RPAs and their root protection barriers and areas, and that quantum could be never ending. You'll have lawyers' fees, you'll have surveyors. So at the moment it's projected, I think, Ivan, indeed, I think a figure of 45,000 has been mooted, but that's the best at this particular point in time. You will not know until probably some months down the line, once surveyors have gone in there, further arborists, structural engineers, to actually know what that endless quantum will be. So yes, a figure of 45,000 has been mooted, but you'll be opening up the council to liability above and beyond that in terms of professional fees and other expenses and costs as well. So I ask you to, yes, consider the planning balance, but also the legal position here. In terms of the actual trees as well and identification of the trees, as the officer rightly made his representations and submissions to you, I was looking at the tree survey report that the insurers submitted to the council. Now this is available on the public portal, and it refers to T4 and T5, and it asks the question, roots implicated, and there's a Y for T4. So yes, the roots have been implicated. So if, say, for example, the small microfibrous roots of a certain millimetre or size are close to the walls or indeed underneath the particular soil, those roots have been identified in the locale of where this subsidence is actually occurring. T5 also, interestingly, has also been implicated. There is a Y in that box also for root identification coming from T5. Suffice it to say, T2, T3 are beeches, so any roots would obviously can be microscopically identified to that particular genus and species, hence why T4 and T5 are showing yes as being implicated. So when you go to answer these particular questions and put into the planning balance, one, is T4 the culprit? More likely than not in my respectful submission, because the roots identify it. Indeed, you've got subsidence in the corner where those trees are located as well. If you were a trier of fact, you would probably say on a balance of probabilities, the roots are implicated, the property is moving in that particular direction of where these significant oaks are. On balance, I would respectfully submit the evidence is there to say the case has been made out. So I ask you please and implore you to bear that regulation in mind as well as the planning merits. So That's what I need to say, Chair, at this particular point in time, but I'm happy to take any questions on liability or quantum, foreseeability, causation, damage and loss.
Councillor Westwood.
Sorry, Chair. I have a further legal question, if you can answer it, and that is that the actual ownership of the trees was cast doubt upon by one of the presenters.
If I may, Councillor, I don't know the application details, and I don't know.
I haven't asked my question yet. Does the legal ownership of the trees impact the decision we're making today? In other words, can somebody apply for a tree to be felled if they're not the owner?
Yeah, so you can apply for any application. You don't have to be the legal owner on it in making the application, but the law, in terms of the regulation, says if on a claim under this regulation, a person, it doesn't say the owner, it says a person.
And could I just ask an extreme, perhaps unlikely case that if the subsidence is so bad that part of the building falls down and then there happened to be a person standing underneath it, would the council be liable for that?
Madam Chairman, you're asking me to speculate on hypotheticals, but I'd like to think the insurers wouldn't let it get to that particular stage. But yes, probably, but there would also be health and safety concerns. I'm sure the insurer would never let it get to that particular position. But we could technically be, to answer your hypothetical.
Councillor Laning.
Yeah, so legally speaking then, if we say that they can chop the tree down, but it's in the ownership of somebody else who refuses to chop the tree down, does that liability then transfer to them rather than us?
So the issue of whether or not a person can get access to the land on which that tree particularly sits will be a private matter between those two individuals. Suffice it to say, we've empowered, shall we say, that person who would be able to make a claim to actually go ahead and at least circumvent the tree regulations and then negotiate a reasonable access in a private law capacity so they weren't trespassers. But you would have discharged your liability in terms of the regulatory regime in terms of TPOs. As for getting access for contractors, that would be a private law issue between whether or not neighbours would reasonably let each other to go on each other's property to allow them to conduct the work.
Asked lots of questions, so debate. I'm going to start, unusually, because I feel that as much as we all love trees, and there is a beautiful tree, there are other consequences. And the consequences are that this is causing subsidence. We have an independent engineer's report, and the possibility of dragging the City Council into an enormous amount of money because of the existence of this tree, I feel personally I can't allow. So I will be regretfully, very regretfully, voting for the disappearance of this tree and the stump. But I'm encouraged that we will be replacing it and that the officers will then make every effort to put a TPO on that. So we haven't completely lost a tree for now, but kept a tree for the future. So that's my view.
Westwood. I find it sad that our decision is being driven by a fear of liability. And I understand exactly what you're talking about, and I understand the implication for the council. But I just find it sad that we're condemning 2 and possibly 3 very old trees because of a fear of future liability. It's a time when the climate crisis is at its fore, and we all know what we should be doing. To replace 3 100-year-old trees, and I possibly contend that they're much older than that, will take how many trees over, a 30-year period, a large number because they need to grow. So I think it's a terrible thing to be happening, but I do understand the implications of the council, and I would urge the officers and the council to debate this internally, because we will encounter this more and more with climate change, and I would hate to see us removing significant numbers of mature trees across our district because of the fear of liability. Thank you.
Yes, I'll second that, because we are losing a significant number of trees due to the climate emergency. I only had a conversation about this earlier on today about what's going on in my ward. So therefore, we're between a rock and a hard place. Really, the trees should be preserved, because the houses were built after the trees have been getting to a large state. So unfortunately, I'll have to go along with this, but I don't like it at all, being held to hostage.
I hear what you're both saying, but we have evidence here. We have evidence from a qualified engineer that this is causing major subsidence. And I do know that I met somebody who told me that they've seen the subsidence. So we can't allow this to continue. The issue of debating it fully is for another agenda, not for this tree, because this tree is causing the damage and it will cause an enormous amount of expense to the City Council if we don't agree to let it come down. I feel that's being irresponsible to our citizens, to be quite honest. Anybody else? So this recommendation has been, well, the recommendation is, get it right, that the tree at White Lodge, Hamerden Road, be felled, and including the stump. I haven't quite got the right words. But fell and treat the stump of T4, oak tree. All those in favour, please show. Those against? No one. Thank you. So that application has been approved. Going. Sorry. Right, item 13, last one of the day. This is a TPO 2326 on the land at Danes Acre, Worthy Road, Winchester, and it is to, recommendation is to confirm. I don't know what PDC 1214 is, but I'm going to say it anyway. So the case officer here is Oscar. Oh, you're there, yeah. And when you're ready, Ivan, we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. So it's what have done now? Back. Yeah, thank you, Chair. This comes to committee because we have an objection to the TPO. So it's land at Danes Acre, Worthy Road, Winchester. Now, this is Danes Acre. You can see the property. If I can find the mouse to. On there, yeah, that's the line of trees there along that the TPO relates to. So this is Worthy Road along here. This is Lank Hills Road along here. Now this is an aerial view shot of the trees. Again, there's Worthy Road along here. This is the trees that the TPO relates to. So Lank Hills Road is under here, and this is the trees there. TPO court there. So if you carry on that way, it goes to Kingsworthy. This way goes past Hyde Court and the coach station there. This is the trees from Worthy Road. You can see this is T1 Sycamore, and then the trees go up Lank Hills Road that way there. So TPO is basically on this corner here, and they go up Lank Hills Road. This shot shows the trees on the left there. These are the trees there. You can see the raised garden. The garden's up here somewhere of Danes Acre. Worthy Road down the bottom there. This is Woodlands Court. This shot is basically shows that this is the base of the tree here, the line of trees, and then the footpath is down here. So on the junction of Worthy Road, like I said, it's sort of a 2 metre difference. And as it goes up Lank Hills Road, obviously the distance gets smaller. So as it goes up there, it levels out. This is looking from Worthy Road up Lank Hills. So on the right there, got the TPO trees. There's a sycamore there, and then this is Woodlands Court on the left there. So it's all public highway. It's all in the public view. This is again looking down. So this is the top of Lank Hills Road, looking down to Worthy Road. So see arrow. There we go. That's Worthy Road at the bottom there. So we're right at the top. Danes Acre is on the left in here. About there it ends. You can see as the land levels off. So it's at the level of the road. Down on Worthy Road, there's about a 2 metre difference between Worthy Road and the garden. Now, the reason TPO was put on because we were tipped off that the property had been sold for development. And Alfred Holmes actually was the people that met on site. And one of the proposals was to fell this beech tree to put a drive in to the property, because that's where there's about a 500 or 600 mil difference between the road and the garden. But in a minute I'll share another slide, another proposal. But say that was the first proposal, was to fell that tree to put it to get onto the site to develop it further. The more than one house is on at the moment. So the red arrow shows you where the beech tree is. So you can see this is Danes Acre, the property there. The proposal from the developer was to build a row of houses along here, and and then plant new trees along the front to take out the mitigation for the big beech. Then the next proposal was, when I said no to that, was to come further down there. So you've got a bigger difference in between the road and the garden, a steeper slope. Is to take, there's an ash tree there, which has not got a TPO on because of ash dieback. And then there's a sycamore behind, which is the top end of the arrow there. That was the proposal, was again to take that out to create an access into there. The problem with that is because of the changing levels is the excavation of the bank. It may disturb the tree roots either side, damage to the trees. And it's not just about cutting a hole through. We've also got then, dig out deep enough to put foundations to the road in, so you're going, you're going a fair way into the bank. So again, that was refused. Said no, that's not acceptable. That we want to keep the TPO trees because this is a cohesive group. These trees have all grown together. So you start cutting holes in the middle of a group of trees that's grown together, because what they do is they brace, the outer trees brace against the inner trees. So the inner trees will on the outer trees. When the wind blows, they're not exposed to forces from the wind. So you have wind pushing the outer trees, make them stronger, protect the inner trees. You remove the stronger trees on the outside, you then expose the weaker trees on the middle. That's when you start to get tree failure, because the trees are not used to the forces, the bending forces that's created by the wind. So it's what we call a cohesive group. And for the best thing for the tree is to keep them as a cohesive group. That ends my presentation, but I just recommend to confirm TPO 2326 because of the amenity value of the cohesive group of trees and the threat for they are under from development. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, questions on anything? Oh gosh, yes. Sorry, I'm missing out. I don't think they're here though, are they? Two Williamses, Mike and Eleanor Williams. Oh, so sorry. Oh dear, I'm sorry to hear that. Yes. So I'm glad you're here. Anyway, it's your moment. So if you'd like to step forward, any microphone, if you can make sure that you have that microphone near you. And then when you're ready, when you start speaking, the clock will count your 3 minutes down. You put, yep, that's it.
Okay.
Yep.
My name's Eleanor Williams, and I represent the 3 trustees and owners of Danes Acre in Worthy Road.
Sorry, you're perhaps too near it. Sorry, that's my fault.
No,
because I asked you
try
to
again.
move it. Yeah.
I represent the 3 trustees and owners of Danes Acre in Worthy Road, which has been our wonderful family home for more than 60 years. Since the death of my husband in summer 2021, the trustees are responsible for the eventual sale of Danes Acre as part of his estate. We object to the tree preservation order on the following grounds. Most of our neighbours' sites have already been developed over the years, leaving Danes Acre as a bit of an anomaly. The house is not of any particular architectural merit and stands in an imposing position higher than most of its neighbours. Vehicle and pedestrian access to the site is from Worthy Road and is steep, narrow and dangerous in frosty and icy weathers. We have been advised that the redevelopment possibilities of the site would be highly questionable without redirecting the access into Lank Hills Road, which is where most of the trees covered in this potential TPO are located. If this access is not possible, a potential redevelopment for the site for higher density residential housing near the city centre of Winchester would be lost. Contrary to the note in the planning pack, the site has not been sold. It was under offer from a developer who is now withdrawn due to the provisional TPO. A further 6 developers have been approached, and all of whom have now turned down the opportunity, waiting to see if the TPO is confirmed. Only a few of the trees in the provisional TPO are directly visible to neighbours, except for the clump on the corner of Lank Hills and Worthy Road. The planting along Worthy Road is much more attractive, but the trees are more sparse and offer an opportunity for additional attractive planting, which will be much more visible to our neighbours and to people passing Danes Acre on foot or by car. The position we are now in makes the Danes Acre site undevelopable, unless we do it ourselves, which is not realistic. We fully support the planting and protection of trees, which we have done over the last 60 years, while the family has lived at Danes Acre. The beeches were planted by my husband. I think he got someone in to do it for him. Were planted to replace the elms which were there before, which died of Dutch elm disease. Without the removal of some of the TPO group and an access created through these trees, the possibility of developing the site is considerably reduced, possibly even eliminated. If any trees are removed in the TPO group, there is plenty of scope to replant elsewhere on the site in a way which would improve the overall visual amenity for ourselves, our neighbours and passers-by. As a compromise, we believe that the removal of T17 from the TPO in this state would leave the possibility of redevelopment on the table. And we believe that the sycamores, in fact, were self-planted. They were not part of my husband's original plan. He planted elms. Sorry, he planted beeches to replace the elms.
Thank you very much. Don't go because there might be some questions of clarification. Are there? Where do you live, Mrs. Williams? Do you live in?
I live in Danesacre, Worthy Road, Winchester.
Yeah. I don't think there are any questions for you. So thank you very much for coming along today.
Thank you.
Could you just switch off the mic?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, so we're going to the report, and it's got lots of sections. So questions on any other report? Could I just ask you, Ivan, the proposal to not fell the TPO tree, not to prevent development, because it's tree value of retention?
That's correct. The TPO was never put on to inhibit or prevent development. It's because the trees are in full public. Lankhills Road is a public highway, and the legislation says that only a part of the tree or tree needs to be seen from the public standpoint. So in fact, the tree is in full public view. So it ticks the boxes for suitability for the TPO.
No questions, no further questions. So this TPO has been recommended to be. Sorry. As you can see, I'm sort of on my last leg there. Debate. Is there any debate? Right, so this application has been recommended to be confirmed. 2326. All those in favour, please show. Thank you, that's everybody. So thank you very much, and that's the end of a perfect day.